Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, let's pray and thanks unto our God, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, who has given us some blessing and mercies. And secondly, may salawat and salam always be given to our great Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we can be right now. And now, the thirdly, let me introduce myself. My name is Badriyatul Mutiah, and I'm from English Education Department 2019. Now, I'm going to test my math. It's about introduction to literature. So let's check it out. So the first topic that I will explain it's about the concept of literature in ELT or English language teaching. The first is about the definition. So literature generally has two different contexts, such as pedagogy context and literary context. Pedagogy context refers to one of academic subject studied by students in a college or universities, even in other institutes of higher education. An example, literature studied by students at the Department of English, and comparative literature in Columbia University, New York. Literature in literary work point of view refers to a written piece of art produced by a certain author. Here, I will give three different theories, but actually their means are same. So the first we can see that from Basnet and Monfort in 1993 defined that literature as a cultural documents of a country or countries, and Eggleton in 1983 defines literature as an art. And the last is Ono Kwasi in 2013 defines literature as any imaginative and beautiful creation in words, whether oral or written, which explores man as he struggles to survive in his essential position and which provides entertainment, information, education, and excitement to its audience. And okay, here allow me to give my opinion about what literature is, that I have read in some contexts or some books what literature is. So in my opinion that I have read, literature is can be written or can be spoken also, which is had been created by humans and it can be educated by each other. Here I will continue to the second step of the concept of literature, that is using literature in ELT. So using literature in ELT is very helped, and also here according to Hill in 1986 and Lazar in 1993, literature for ELT in the language classroom provides students with the opportunity to engage with a wide variety of meaningful texts that are infused with imaginative potential. It allows to students to come into contact with the target language in interesting and genuine context. We'll explain about the relationship between literature in ELT. According to Ilyas in 2016, the potential benefits of using literature in ELT classrooms seems to have been forgotten in recent ELT curriculum. What does Ilyas mean by stating that? It means that in the context of recent curriculum in Indonesia, literature and English language teaching are treated as two separated areas. Also here, literature just can be found in English department. It is treated as an academic subject. But literature lost in English language teaching, not included in curriculum ELT or English language teaching. But the perspective argument writes that literature and language are found to be together and connected and cannot be separated. Language is one method of communicating messages, while literature can be used to convey messages being communicated. In Nostal, the relationship between literature and language is symbiotic, and one of which is one will not exist without the other. It's about the position of literature in the mainstream of ELT. Next, here I will explain about the trend of ELT today and the status of literature. According to Ilyas in 2016, literature nowadays is widely neglected in ELT due to the popularity of communicative approach. Consequently, many teachers feel anxiety about using literature in the classroom. That they describe the practice of using literature text from the business of English language teaching, or we can say it's like ELT. But Xeri D and Xeri Agis in 2012, they said that the status of literature is not popular because the emergence of communicative approach with its CLT method. CLT requires authentic and functional-based teaching, while literature is regarded unable to give those two things. Therefore, many English teaching avoid using it, or few teachers want to use it for teaching purpose. And here I will explain about the differences between pessimistic and the optimistic view. Examples: the pessimistic view, according to Edmondson, 1997, it is unable to help the development of second language, competence, and proficiency of the learners. It means that studying language through literature is considered unable to help in developing the second language. It's very developed in the second language, competencies and the skills of the learners, because it has high structural complexity and lack of conformity to standard grammatical rules. Topic 1968. For example, the language used is a language that has a high grammar and vocabulary that is not in accordance with the level of students' thinking, as well as its linguistics difficulty requires a lot of background knowledge, English, language and culture. Sullivan in 1991. It means that students does not only learn about English, but also they need to know more about the cultures found in English. While the optimistic view widely supported by teachers, researchers, and linguists, because literature is useful in developing students' linguistics knowledge, both on usage and use level. It can increase their reading motivation in order to improve their reading skills. It may also enhance students' understanding of a foreign culture, and perhaps spur their own creation of imaginative works, MHK in 1982. And also, literature is beneficial for ELT learners, and ELT students can benefit from the role of literature in promoting, among other things, language acquisition and language proficiency. Ilyas in 2016. And here, I support the optimistic view. Why? Because literature can be useful in the developing students' linguistics knowledge, can increase their reading motivation in order the students can improve their reading skills, and literature is beneficial for students because it can benefit from the role of literature, namely language acquisition and language proficiency. As well as in studying literature, little by little means we have studied more in English culture. Topic that I have to tell here, or that I have to explain here, it's about the approach to the use of literature. In this session, first I will explain about the approach to the use of literature. So, divided in three types. The first is the approaches to the use of literature in ELT. I said there are three types, or there are three kinds of approaches of using literature in language teaching context. And these are about the first, language-based model. In this model, the language teachers focus on the language components available in a certain literature. Examples: the use of grammar, syntax, types of vocabulary, morphology, and the source function and meaning. Sometimes we call it like semantic, to be taken into account in designing syllables and teaching materials. The second, literature as content. In this approach, the language teachers are required to suit the genre of the literature with language components to teach the students in the classroom. For examples, we can see when the learners prefer to learn poetry, so this genre is generally appropriate for practicing pronunciation skill. But when the learners are interested in learning short stories, so this genre is commonly suitable for practicing translation skills and etc. And the last is a literature for personal enrichment. In this model, the language teachers may use a certain literary work as the basis for selecting a particular activity to be applied in the classroom for teaching the students. The activity is aimed at giving the learners an opportunity to express opinions, feelings, personal experiences, and regarding to the literary work. I will explain about the approach in LT. So the first is traditional grammar approach. According to Smith in 2003, traditional grammar theory is the study of the structure as well as the formation of words. It's like morphology. And sentences is like syntax, usually without much reference to sound and meaning. This concept is found somewhat different from the concept of grammar or structure. In modern linguistics, study in which grammar is defined as the study of the whole interrelated system available in the structures of sentences. In a particular language, and examples we can know it like sounds, words, phrases, sentences, as well as meanings. Many linguists believed that teaching a language by using this approach was not strong enough to develop many learners or to develop many students' language knowledge and skills because the focus was limited to the referred language claimed as the standard language, which consequently made the language knowledge of the learners isolated by components of the standard language. Realizing the shortcoming, the linguist then we can be suggested that English teachers to use descriptive approach instead of perspective approach. They were of the opinion that using a descriptive approach in the classroom with the learners allows the students to investigate language on a deeper level, enabling students to analyze real samples of a mixture of English dialect varieties, not simply focus on exploring the prescribed language. According to Xia 2014, traditional grammar theory inspires the birth of grammar translation method in language pedagogy. Many teachers conducted their language classes under the guidance of this method. At the time, the method was implemented with the following characteristics, such as the primary goal of a foreign language, teaching in the classroom, or to read text written in the foreign language, but not oral language. And second is about the dominant activity is in the classroom is to translate that foreign language into one's mother tongue. Good translation becomes a decisive measurement to judge a learner's success in foreign language study. And the next is again, learners take decides to be able to communicate in the foreign language because oral language skill is not the target of teaching the method. And the next, teachers dominate the class while learners are required to write down every detail of information given by the teachers. It's like teacher-centered. And next, learners are encouraged to grasp language from pronunciation or vocabulary, and even mainly the grammar or structures. is correctly. And next, teachers are required to speak in the foreign language during the class and to correct every single error of language forms made by the learners. Even if grammar translation method has been largely abandoned by the language teachers today, but it must be borne in mind that the criticism toward this method is deemed as the pioneer of diverse linguistics and language teaching theories, including the next of generation in our generation in Indonesia. Linguistic theories such as structuralism and functionalism. And the second is structural approach. This theory focused on examining language as a static system of interconnected units. One of the following participle in this theory is structuralism requires learners to learn language skills as a unified system as a whole. Therefore, they need a source of language components for information or for imitation in order to build their skills in a foreign language. The underlying principles of structuralism has guided this theory in the classroom to use this language pedagogy and has resulted in the introduction of audio-lingual method for teaching foreign language. The method was very interesting, and the method was sometimes known as informant method. And of course, it was called informant method since it employed a native speaker of the language called as the informant who served as a source of phrases. Not only phrases but also vocabulary and who provided sentences for imitation. And the last is about functional and communicative approach. This functionalism theory is known as an approach to language study that is concerned with studying the functions performed by language use. It views a language as a communication system consisting of components of form and function that must be learned by the learners as unified knowledge. The notion of communicative competence is the underlying knowledge as a speaker has of the rules. Not the rules, but it's like of the rules grammar, including the phonology, orthography, syntax, lexicon, and semantics, and also the rules for their use in socially appropriate curriculum tenses. Human said, Actualism theory is known as an approach to language to study that is concerned with studying the functions performed by language use. It views a language as a communication system consisting of components of form and function that must be learned by learners, of course, as unified knowledge. The primary principle of this theory has been pushed many researchers, many teachers, and many linguists to examine aspects of the language functions beside the language forms. This is done by analyzing the language discourse of both oral and written to find the purposes behind the use of certain utterances in communication by identifying the purposes and objectives of language discourse. They could then identify language functions of the sentences used by the native speakers or some foreign in their social interactions. For examples, we can see or we can know as a speaker say, "Good morning, sir," or "Good morning, ma'am." This expression is identified to show the function of greeting in English. The development of functionalism theory has become an inspiration for the learners, has become an inspiration for some linguists to conduct research on discourse analysis, as their efforts to discover the social and cultural aspects behind the language used by humans to communicate. Next, here I will explain again about the rules of the two types of approaches for the integration of literature in ELT, or divided in three types, such as the first, traditional grammar approach consists of basis model of language or regarding the component of language, and literature as a content, the teacher knowledge of the literary genre. And the second is the structural consists of the basic model of the language regarding the component of language, and literature as enrichment itself, giving the students the opportunity. And the last is the functional and the communicative approach consists of literature as the content, the teacher knowledge of literary genre, and literature as enrichment itself, giving the students the opportunity to develop it. Continue to the next topic. So the next topic here I will explain about, or I will tell about, literary works for English language teaching. So the first in this session is the different literature and literary works. Literature may be defined as any spoken or written text resulted from the creativity of human's mind, are commonly used to entertain or to educate many people. And how about literary works? Literary works may be defined as any spoken or written text created as a result of human creative imagination that have been evaluated by reading and analyzing them. Reading them make readers feel very entertained or educated, while analyzing them make readers widen their way of looking at the different issues and their beliefs in LT materials, and it may be understood a special term applied to refer to any literatures or literary works which are used for teaching English language. Of course, we have a novel book of poetry that we have been dying to use with our students or your students for a long time. But where can we get material? It's very easy. The internet brings you instant access to many works of literature. Use a search engine. Usually it is enough to key in the name of author or the book you are looking for. Older books and plays can be sometimes be found entirely online, and we have to think about the following factors when you choose a piece of literature to use with the learners. And you have to know, it's like, do you understand enough about the text to feel comfortable using it? And the second, you have to know, is there enough time to work on the text in the class, and does it fit with the rest on your syllabus? And also, is it something that could be relevant to the learners, and will it be motivating for them? And also, how much cultural or literary background do the learners need to be able to deal with the text? And is the level of language in the text too difficult? If we observe how a teacher generally teaches, then we will find three main stages, such as pre-teaching or planning, while teaching or implementing, and the third is a post-teaching, or we can say evaluating. Pre-teaching refers to the things that the teachers do before imparting knowledge to a group of students. Planning for teaching. Planning means to make a set of decisions about what to do to the learners and how to do something to the learners. Therefore, in pre-teaching, a teacher is usually required to plan two things, such as planning for what to teach, teaching materials, and planning for how to teach, teaching methods. In order to be able to use these types of literature in teaching English effectively, EFL teachers should consider several factors, such as students' interest in certain types of literature, and compatibility between the literature and the level of students' language skills, and students' background knowledge of literature. And fourth, the time allotment and the length of literature. And next, the possibility of using it for language learning purposes. Therefore, by considering the factors, literary texts may be taught in their original forms or in simplified version, and in various tasks, difficulties, and obviously the teachers would not want to use a text that is completely beyond their learners. This would ultimately be frustrating for everyone involved. However, the immediate difficulty with vocabulary in text might not be obstacle to its comprehension. Learners can be trained to infer meaning of difficult words from the context. The selection of text must be given carefully thought, but also the treatment of the text by the teacher. This means think about the text you set for reading of a piece of literature, not just the text. I continue my explanation about the difference between English language teaching and teaching. If the notion of teaching is then brought into the area of teaching English, then the English language teaching can be interpreted as the process of imparting skills and knowledge of English to a group of students whose first language is not English through the implementation of three main stages, such as pre-teaching or planning, the second while teaching or giving instruction, as well as post-teaching measuring learning outcomes. Then, in my opinion, teaching is defined as the process of imparting knowledge or skill to a group of students by applying three main stages, such as planning the teaching, giving instruction in teaching, and evaluating the teaching outcomes. Based in English language teaching or ELT, the process of imparting skills and knowledge of English to a group of students whose first language is not English by using literatures or literary works through the implementation of three main stages, such as pre-teaching or planning, and second is while teaching or like giving instruction, as well as post-teaching measuring learning outcomes. And literary-based English language teaching has divided in two types. Those are what to teach and how to teach. The first, what to teach. What to teach here is skills and knowledge of English by using literatures or literary works through the implementation of three main stages, as we can see, such as pre-teaching or planning, while teaching, giving instruction, and as well as post-teaching or measuring learning outcomes. And the second is how to teach the learners, how to teach in the classroom. Implementing, there are three main stages. As I said before, it's like there are three. First is pre-teaching or planning, lesson plans, teaching materials. The second is while teaching or giving instruction or methods and techniques. And the last is post-teaching, measuring learning outcomes. Summative, formative, evaluation, what to teach and how to teach. Actually, what to teach and how to teach is related in each other, and it become a teaching technique. It means a way of imparting knowledge and skills of English using literature of literary works. The last topic, that's about teaching methods and ELT methods. In this session, the first I will explain about the concept of teaching methods. Here I can get from the Smith's method and techniques. The first is teacher-centered method, and it's divided about talking, explaining, showing, questioning, and note-making. And the second is the active methods, and it's divided into supervised students, practice and discussion, group work, games, role play, drama, and simulation, and the last is seminars. And the third is student-centered method, and it's divided, it's like reading for learning, private study and homework, and assignment and essays, and projects and reports, and independent learning, and the last is self-directed learning. Is the concept of ELT methods and the type concepts. To understand the ELT or English language teaching, then we must first understand the definition of teaching. So, teaching is the process to give or share the knowledge to everyone or to the learners. And about the types, the first is pre-teaching, refers to things that teachers do before imparting knowledge to a groups of situation or the students planning for teaching. And the second is while teaching, refers to things that teachers do when imparting knowledge to a group of students. And the third is post-teaching, refers to the things that teachers do after doing the process of imparting knowledge to a group of students, or it's like evaluating the teaching. And the last of this session, I will explain about the function of knowledge of literature, approaches and method for integrating literature in ELT or English language teaching. So the function of knowledge, literature or approaches and method for integrating literature in ELT is like using literature in English language teaching is not exception. Approach in this section needs to be recognized in two versions, such as approaches employed to the use of literature in ELT and approaches employed to teach English. Knowing literature made us understand two underrated things. As we said, literature is an art. We could get information, education, and a lot of things from literature. So, for last but not least, in this session, I will give my conclusion. So, I can conclude that from this, we have known that many concepts, such as concept of literature in ELT, what the position of literature in the mainstream of ELT, and how we use the approach in literature, and how we use literary works for ELT, and what method that we use in teaching, and what ELT method is. Suggestion for English teacher for always using approach to the students. Because of the approach, the classroom and the lesson will run well because of approach between the teacher and the students or the learners. Thank you very much for this time. May I hope you can understand what I have said. And thank you for watching, and I say wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and have a nice day.